I love hockey. It's a great game.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Hodesh Hockey, and it's playoff time, baby. I am so excited. From the start of the year, honestly, playoffs were kind of a pipe dream. I was thinking maybe the Kings can sneak into a wild card spot, but the Kings clinched third place in the division. I kind of debated on, recapping the season before this, but I'm just too excited. I want to get this playoff preview going because I'm excited about the matchup. The Oilers are a scary team, for sure. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, any matchup against them is going to be scary. But out of the teams that they could have played, the Oilers are one that I think the Kings have a chance of upsetting. And it scares me a little bit because I had the same feeling in 2018 against Vegas, and we all know how that went. But I don't know. I'm feeling good about this, and I'm going to go in depth here, so stick around. If you want to subscribe and keep up with the videos, that would be awesome. I also have a couple links in the description to my Twitter, which I don't really use except for King stuff. So if you want to follow that, do that. But let's get into it because this is going to be hopefully a long series, and we got a lot to talk about. All right, so before we look at the playoff series, let's look at the past. And like I mentioned, the last time the Kings were in the playoffs, it was 2018, and they faced the Golden Knights, and they got swept. And the reason they got swept was they could not score goals. Jonathan Quick played phenomenally, but the Kings scored 3 goals in 4 games. And that was really the downfall for the Kings' whole franchise. And the reason that we had to go into this rebuild was because the team just wasn't good enough. And looking at the team now, I think we're a much better team. Obviously, we're missing Drew Doughty. You don't have to explain what Drew Doughty brings to a team, especially in the playoffs. But I still think top to bottom, the team that we have right now is a much more deeper team. Even on the blue line, I mean, if you look at some of the players that we had in 2018, Paul Ledoux was the one guy on the defense that scored a goal. So I think this team is a much better team right now, but the goal scoring is still the biggest question mark, and it's something that the Kings have done a better job of this year. They've actually had some depth scoring. The second line has been phenomenal. Adrian Kempe's found a scoring touch. Even a guy like Arthur Kaliev, having that kind of secret weapon that's going to play on the third or fourth line, it's something that this team didn't have in 2018. So, looking back, I feel like it's a very similar situation where, the Kings are kind of being talked about as a potential underdog. They're facing a really good team that people still have doubts on. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Kings can change their fate and actually, 1, win a game, and 2, advance past the first round for the first time in a long time. And looking at the Oilers, unfortunately for them, they had the same fate in their last playoff outing. They got swept by the Jets last year. It was a little bit different playoff format because of COVID, but at the end of the day, they got swept. And fairly or unfairly, it's kind of put a damper on how people view the Oilers, how they view Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, because, a team with those 2 guys should be able to win a game in the playoffs. I feel like it might bring a big chip on their shoulder into this LA series, but at the same time, history isn't on their side. It's not on the Kings side either, but both teams are really looking to try and bounce back into being looked at as a contender in the playoffs. The Kings obviously had such good success in the early 2000s. They want to get back to that level, and it starts by getting farther in the playoffs. And for the Oilers, they need to try and break their curse in a way, and they need to show that Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid can lead a team into the playoffs. They can get past the first round and really make a deep run. So it's going to be interesting. Both teams have a chip on their shoulder. I do think when you look at it, though, the Kings definitely have the house money in this. You just feel like the Oilers need to win this series. Connor McDavid has to show that he can perform in the playoffs. He needs to find another step. Whereas the Kings, honestly, no one really expected the Kings to be here or really have a shot at advancing past the first round. anything they can do here is going to be good for them. You know, if everything else fails, they're going to get a lot of young guys, some really good playoff experience. And at the end of the day, this could be the last time that we're seeing Dustin Brown in a Kings jersey. And don't worry, I'm going to make a whole video on Dustin Brown because what he's done for this team is honestly just remarkable. And I don't think he's getting enough praise, honestly, because of how quick the retirement announcement was. But we got to enjoy these games because it's going to be crazy not seeing him in a Kings uniform next year. 18 years. Let's enjoy it while it lasts, and hopefully we get to see a lot more than 4 games. All right, so now let's look at what happened this year. The teams played each other 4 times, and the record can be lopsided depending on how you look at it. The first game, Kings won 5-1. This was when Connor McDavid got ejected for a high hit on Adrian Kempe. The Kings got a 5-minute major, capitalized on it, and really just the Edmonton Oilers, after McDavid got ejected, a lot of the wind was out of their sails. So 5-1 victory for the Kings in their first matchup. The second matchup, almost the complete opposite. This was the first game back after the long All-Star break, and the Kings looked pretty sluggish. They end up losing 5-2 to the Oilers. But the last 2 games happened pretty recently. The first one was a 4-3 loss in the shootout. So, again, a pretty close game against the Oilers. And then the last time they met, it was a 3-2 game. Again, a 1-goal game. You know, obviously the Kings lose, so they've lost 3 of them. One of them was in the shootout. But I feel like the matchup this year was pretty close. It's going to be a really interesting playoff series because I want to get into it now where, you know, the playoffs are just a different game. And, you know, there's a reason that people try and paint very skilled players as not being playoff performers because the game it's a tougher game. There's less penalty called, which definitely helps the Kings because, man, the power play has not been good, and Edmonton's power play is insane. So it's going to be more 5-on-5 hockey, which the Kings are a very, very good 5-on-5 team. And it's a really physical game. Edmonton is not the biggest team, especially their defense. You know, Darnell Nurse is what I would consider their only real, star defenseman. If you can get on him, you know, in game 1 early, and this is kind of my, I guess, hot take is where I feel like game 1, I don't even care if the Kings win or not. I want the Kings to go out there and just be wrecking balls. Put in Lemieux, put in Grundstrom, Dustin Brown, make as big of a lineup as you can. Just dump and chase the whole game. Wear their defense out starting from game 1 because, in my opinion, if the Kings are going to win this, it's going to be in 6 or 7 games. It's going to be because they wear Edmonton down. And, you know, you look in goal as well, Mike Smith, he's a hothead. You know, if you have Lemieux going in every time he's covering a puck and just giving the little tap to his glove, it's going to fire him up. And a lot of times when Mike Smith gets fired up, he takes dumb penalties and he can get off his game. So that's definitely going to have to be a strategy for the Kings. They need to use the fact that the playoffs are a different animal. They're going to be able to get away with more. Go hard on Connor McDavid. Go hard on Leon Draisaitl. Leon Draisaitl is another guy who, you know, if you start getting on him, he does get a little angry. Obviously, he's, you know, known for those cup check spearing and slashes, which is something that, hey, you know, if you get him mad enough and he does that, maybe he's out for a game or 2. So I just think it's super important starting from game 1 for the Kings to just be ultra heavy, ultra aggressive, and use the fact that the Oilers are more of a skilled team than the Kings and maybe not as big of a team, and use the guys who can do that kind of play that kind of way. Like I said, Lemieux, Grundstrom, Dustin Brown, you know, final couple games, go out. You know, Dustin Brown's the all-time leader in hits. He's got to hit a lot. And it's not just those guys. It has to happen all the way throughout the lineup. A guy like Arthur Kaliev's done such a good job this year of becoming more physical, being a much better battler on the boards. He's going to have to do that. Quentin Byfield needs to get physical. It has to happen all throughout the lineup. So when we start comparing these teams, the obvious comparison is in goal. Mike Smith, Jonathan Quick, two veteran goalies. Two goalies have met before in the playoffs. They met in the 2012 Western Conference Finals. Quickie, obviously, the victor. Mike Smith, for how much people were clowning on him in the beginning of the year, he's really turned it around. He's become a really good goalie for them. That's why I talked about it's important to get in his head. You got to find any kind of way to get an advantage, because if we look at his games, kind of since here, right? You look at the save percentage, 926. That's a pretty good save percentage, 4-5-1. He's been doing a decent job in the net. I don't think it's being talked about as much because earlier on this season, the goaltending was very heavily criticized for Edmonton, but Mike Smith definitely playing really well. Obviously, Jonathan Quick lately, like in the past couple weeks, has really turned it on. And, you just know that Jonathan Quick in the playoffs is going to step up. Again, that 2018 series, I'm going to keep going back to it, but he was the second best player in that series. The only thing was the best player was Marc-Andre Fleury. That can't happen this time. He has to be a better goalie than Mike Smith. And, again, the Achilles heel to Mike Smith is just his head. He's a little bit of a hothead. But, again, looking at this record, I mean, it's a little scary. He's on a heater. As much as Jonathan Quick's been playing really well, last 9 games, 9-0. So the Kings are going to have their work cut out for them. Again, the Kings are not a great scoring team, but they got to use the fact that, the Oilers defense isn't that great. They have Duncan Keith, who has a lot of experience, but he's a lot older now. They have some young guys on the blue line. They're going to have to find ways. And that's why, I really think it's important for the Kings to stay calm. They're going to have to win one in Edmonton, obviously. And the Kings have been a really good road team, but they're going to need to win one of the first 2 games. Again, I said that I don't really care if the Kings win game 1 as long as they're putting in work to wear that team down. But if they can stun them in game 1, I just think that would kind of put a little bit of doubt in a guy like Connor McDavid's head. And you could see kind of a replay of last year where they get swept. The number one thing that the Kings are going to have circled on their whiteboard talking about this series is Connor McDavid. If you look at the last 2 playoffs, he has 13 points in 8 games played. It's still very good. So even though they lost both series, he's still putting up points, and he's going to put up points against the Kings. That's why the depth for the Kings is going to have to be a big factor. Now, the Oilers have really improved their depth. A big reason why they really turned around under Woodcroft is they've actually had a really good third line. They've gotten depth scoring along with improved goaltending and just improved defense as a team as well. But Connor McDavid is the main man. How do you stop that? Well, again, 5-on-5 hockey. Connor McDavid, 35% of his points were on the power play. Leon Draisaitl, 44% of his goals were on the power play. In a playoff environment, when there's less calls being made, there's less power play opportunities, these guys aren't as effective as they are when they do have the man advantage. It's going to be very important for the Kings to not cross that line. They need to play physical. They need to get on these guys, but you can't cross the line. And, especially when you're talking about a young guy like Quinn Byfield, Quinn Byfield takes a lot of penalties, a lot of, little ticky-tack penalties that, maybe aren't going to be called, but I just feel like rookies don't get the benefit of the doubt. If Kopitar does something that could be a hook, referees are more likely to let it slide than a guy like Quinn Byfield. So making sure that you're not taking penalties, but still maintaining a really physical, really hard, just irritating game is going to be a huge part of what the Kings are going to try and do. That is enough talking about the Oilers. Let's talk about the Kings. What do they really need to do to win this series? Well, you need 4 wins to win, so I have 4 keys for them. Number 1, Jonathan Quick. Jonathan Quick's got to play like playoff Quick. I don't have much doubt about that, just knowing how competitive he is. One I talked about is Pepe Lemieux. Ben Lemieux, I feel like he's got to be playing. He hasn't played every game for the last couple weeks since he's came back from injury, but this is the type of games that you want a Brendan Lemieux on your team. He's going to get under the opponent's skin. He's going to finish checks. He's going to try and rile them up. The next big part is Phillip Danault. We saw what Phillip Danault did with Montreal last year. I don't know if he needs to put the team on his back as much as he did last season with Montreal, but he needs to be able to shut down Connor McDavid. He did such a good job of it against Austin Matthews when they played Toronto. It's going to be a similar situation. They're going to be putting him out there. If not against Connor McDavid, he's going to be facing Leon Draisaitl. We need him to play shutdown defense again. And, the offense has obviously really been a big factor for him this year. He's really made that jump. Any offense that he adds is going to be really needed for the Kings, but he's got to play really solid defense. He's got to just make it very, very tough for those guys. Again, especially on 5-on-5, they're not as effective as they are on the power play. You got to throw Phillip Danault out there pretty much every other shift if the games are close. I really expect him to probably lead in ice time. I could see him getting more ice time than Anze Kopitar. It kind of depends on the matchups that the Oilers are going to try and do when they're the home team. But Phillip Danault's proven that he can shut down star players. He's got 2 star players on the other side that he's going to be asked to do that. The last key to victory is, in my opinion, Adrian Kempe. Kempe was part of the 2018 team that got swept. He didn't have a point, -2, but he was still young back then. He was kind of playing 3rd, 4th line minutes. This season, he's obviously made a huge jump in the regular season, scoring 35 goals. He needs to play like he did when he was in Manchester for their Calder Cup run. He had something like 9 goals, led the team in goals. That's what they're going to need from him. He's got to score, honestly, at a goal-a-game pace if this team wants to advance and advance far. The Kings have really lacked a true goal scorer since that 2014 Cup run team. And this is the first year that someone's kind of broken out, and he's broken out. But he did it at the AHL level as an 18, 19-year-old kid. Can he use the momentum and the confidence that he's built up all year to really become a threat and become someone that we can depend on to score, a goal every game and, kind of drag us out of what's been our biggest Achilles heel, not being able to score goals. I feel like this team can outplay the Oilers 5-on-5. They're going to get more shots. They're going to have opportunities. You need guys to put the puck in the net. Adrian Kempe has been that guy so far. Can he continue it in the playoffs? I don't know. I don't know what to think. I feel like I'm struggling with, my brain kind of saying, look, the Oilers are a dangerous team. They're 24-9-2 since their new coach took over. They've got a really big chip on their shoulder, a lot to prove. My brain's saying the Oilers are going to win, and I don't know if it's going to be a close series. I could see them winning in 4 or 5. But my heart obviously says the Kings. My heart says Jonathan Quick's not going to let this team lose like that. My heart says that, guys like Phillip Danault, Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown, these guys are going to do what they've done before. And it's going to be fun. I think, again, as Kings fans, we have to look at it like we weren't supposed to be here. We've got a favorable matchup when you consider it that we could have faced Calgary, we could have faced Colorado. Anything can happen. It's playoff hockey. We've been lucky in the past to have some really good teams. Is this team one of those teams? Is this team that can go far? If it is, that's great. If not, look, we're getting really good quality playoff performance ice time for guys like Quinn Byfield, guys like Mikey Anderson, Toby Bjornfoot, Trevor Moore, a guy who hasn't played playoff hockey. Let's get these guys experience and, next year come back if all else fails. But like I said, I'm going to go Kings in 6. That's going to be my prediction. I'm going with my heart this time. And we'll see what happens. Again, game 1 on Monday. Kings got to go out and just go for it. Just play like there's no tomorrow. For a guy like Dustin Brown, there might not be a tomorrow. So no excuse for him to lay off. He's got to throw the body around. Kings got to throw the body around. Get a couple goals. Play some tight checking hockey. And just stick with the system. The Kings have won a lot more games against pretty good teams that they probably shouldn't. And it's because they've stuck to their system. Every guy's bought in. Guys are doing what they need to do. They're playing their role. They're exceeding their role. You know, when you think of a guy like Sean Dursey who gets called up because of injuries, you know, he's exceeded his role. That's the story of the season, no matter what. Anything that happens going forward is, you know, it's just a bonus. But man, it would feel good to win a series finally for the first time in a long time, and especially against the Edmonton Oilers. Stick it to Canada, stick it to Connor McDavid. Let's go out there, let's play some playoff hockey, and let's get some good results and keep this season alive. Because, like I said, I don't want to see Dustin Brown retire, and it's going to happen. Let's hope it happens 16, 17, 25 games from now.